The Brunali mothership loomed over Earth, its massive hull blotting out the sun. Zachary Bryant gripped the controls of his fighter, heart pounding. He knew the stakes. Earth's defenses were crumbling, and humanity's survival hung by a thread. As he led the counterattack, Zachary couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would change everything. Laser fire erupted around him as Zachary weaved through the chaos. His squadron targeted the mothership's weak points, but the Brunali's superior technology made their efforts seem futile. Suddenly, a direct hit rocked Zachary's fighter. Alarms blared as he lost control, spiraling towards the alien vessel. The crash landing was brutal. Zachary emerged from the wreckage, his combat training kicking in as he assessed his surroundings. The mothership's interior was a maze of sleek, alien architecture. He moved swiftly, avoiding Brunali patrols and searching for a way to turn this disaster into an advantage. Deep within the ship, Zachary stumbled upon a holding area. The sight shocked him. Dozens of alien prisoners, each species more exotic than the last. Among them stood a female Brunali, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with an otherworldly glow. This was Zanth, though Zachary didn't know her name yet. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Zachary made a decision that would alter the course of the war. He activated his plasma cutter, slicing through the cell's force field. As alarms blared, Zachary shouted, "If you want to live, follow me." The prisoners didn't need to be told twice. They surged forward, led by the female Brunali. She spoke quickly, her voice melodic, yet urgent. "I'm Zanth. I tried to warn other species about this invasion. My people imprisoned me for it." Zachary nodded, processing this information as they ran. "I'm Zachary. We need to find a way off this ship, but first, we're going to do some damage." With Zanth's knowledge of Brunali systems and Zachary's combat expertise, they formulated a plan. The unlikely team fought their way to the propulsion control room, leaving a trail of disabled Brunali soldiers in their wake. As Zanth's fingers danced over the alien controls, sabotaging the mothership's engines, she shared crucial information. The Brunali have a fatal flaw in their neural implants. Disrupt the right frequency, and you can incapacitate entire battalions. Zachary's mind raced with the implications. This could turn the tide of the war, but first, they needed to escape. With the propulsion systems crippled, buying Earth's forces precious time, they made their way to the shuttle bay. Alarms blared and Brunali forces closed in as Zachary and Zanth piloted a stolen shuttle out of the mothership. As Earth grew larger in the view screen, Zachary couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and trepidation. He'd saved an alien who opposed her own people's invasion, potentially changing the course of the war. But how would Earth's military leaders react to Zanth? Their landing on Earth was met with a mix of awe and suspicion. As Zachary and Zanth were escorted to a secure facility, he couldn't shake the feeling that their fates were now intertwined. The information Zanth carried could be the key to humanity's survival, and Zachary found himself drawn to her courage and determination. As they began to work with Earth's strategists, planning a counteroffensive that could push back the Brunali invasion, Zachary and Zanth's bond deepened. Despite their vast biological and cultural differences, they found common ground in their shared goal of peace. With Earth preparing for its most crucial battle and the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, Zachary couldn't help but wonder, could this unlikely partnership be the beginning of something greater? As he caught Zanth's eye across the war room, he realized that the future held possibilities he'd never imagined, both for Earth and for himself. The war room buzzed with activity as Earth's military leaders pored over the intelligence Zanth had provided. General Hawkins, a grizzled veteran with piercing blue eyes, studied the holographic display of Brunali ship schematics. "And you're certain about this weakness in their neural implants?" he asked, his voice gruff but tinged with hope. Zanth nodded, her bioluminescent skin pulsing softly. "Absolutely. A precise electromagnetic pulse at the right frequency will render their forces immobile." Zachary watched as the tension in the room slowly dissipated. He could see the gears turning in the minds of Earth's top strategists. After days of heated debate and rigorous verification, a decision was reached. "Bryant," General Hawkins called out, "you're our most experienced pilot against the Brunali. We're putting together an elite squad, and we want you to lead it." Zachary straightened, a mix of pride and apprehension coursing through him. "Yes, sir. What's the mission?" "We're going on the offensive," Hawkins replied, a grim smile on his face. "Miss Zanth here will be your tactical advisor. You'll be flying modified fighters equipped with tech based on her intel." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Zachary's squad, comprised of Earth's finest pilots, underwent intensive training. They learned to operate the new hybrid fighters, melding human intuition with Brunali technology. Zanth was a constant presence during these sessions, her insights proving invaluable. Zachary found himself spending more and more time with her, not just during training, but in quiet moments between exercises. One evening, as they sat in the base's observation deck watching the sunset, Zanth turned to Zachary. "Your species continues to amaze me," she said softly. "The resilience, the adaptability, I've never seen anything like it." Zachary felt a warmth spread through his chest. "We're not so different, you and I," he replied. "You stood up against your own people to do what's right. That takes a special kind of courage." Their eyes met, and for a moment the war seemed distant. Zanth's skin glowed with a soft, pulsating light that Zachary had come to recognize as a sign of strong emotion. The moment was broken by the blaring of alarms. They rushed to the command center, where a grim-faced General Hawkins awaited. "It's time," he announced. "The Brunali are pushing hard on our defenses in the Pacific. We're launching the counteroffensive now." Zachary's squad took to the skies, their new fighters gleaming in the morning sun. Zanth's voice came through clear in their comms, guiding them towards key Brunali targets. The battle was intense. Zachary weaved through a maelstrom of laser fire, his enhanced fighter responding to his every command with lightning precision. He watched in awe as his squadron executed maneuvers that would have been impossible just weeks ago. "Supply depot at 2 o'clock, Zanth's voice crackled through the comm. "Take it out and we'll cripple their logistics in this sector." Zachary led the charge, his targeting system locking onto the alien structure. With a barrage of missiles, the depot erupted into a ball of flame. Over the next few days, Earth's forces pushed back against the Brunali invasion. Zachary's squad spearheaded the offensive, striking at communication relays and command centers. The tide of war seemed to be turning. But the Brunali High Command had one last terrible card to play. Zachary was in the war room with Zanth when the first reports came in. A massive energy signature had been detected in orbit above New York City. "No," Zanth whispered, her skin paling to a sickly hue. "They've brought the sunbreaker." Before anyone could react, a blinding flash lit up the monitors. When the light faded, New York was gone. In its place was a smoldering crater, visible even from space. The room fell silent, the weight of millions of lost lives pressing down on everyone present. Zachary felt a cold fury building inside him, mixed with a crushing sense of failure. Zanth's hand found his, her touch cool against his skin. "There's still a way," she said, her voice steady despite the horror in her eyes. "I know where they build those weapons. We can stop this from happening again." All eyes turned to her as she outlined her plan. A high-risk mission to infiltrate the Brunali's primary shipyard and destroy it from within. General Hawkins frowned. "It could be a trap. How can we be sure?" Zachary stepped forward. "I trust her, sir, with my life. Let me lead this mission." After hours of debate, the plan was approved. Zachary assembled a team of his most skilled operatives, each one volunteering despite the extreme danger. As they prepared for the mission, Zanth pulled Zachary aside. Her skin shimmered with a pattern he'd never seen before. "Zachary," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need you to know something. These past weeks, working with you, seeing your kindness and bravery, it's changed me. I've developed feelings I never thought possible between our species." Zachary's heart raced. He realized that he too had been grappling with similar emotions. "Zanth, She placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. "We don't have time for this now, but when we return, when this is over, perhaps we can explore what this means, for us and for our peoples." Zachary nodded, a new perseverance filling him. They had to succeed not just for Earth, but for the promise of a future he'd never dared to imagine. The mission launched under the cover of a massive assault on Brunali positions in the asteroid belt. Zachary's team, with Zanth as their guide, slipped past the enemy's outer defenses in a cloaked shuttle. As they approached the massive space station housing the shipyard, Zachary felt a mix of awe and dread. The structure was larger than any space installation he'd ever seen, jam-packed with weapons and surrounded by a cloud of patrol ships. "There," Zanth pointed to a small opening near the station's equator. "That's our way in." Zachary piloted the shuttle with precision, slipping through the gap and into a cavernous docking bay. As they disembarked, the scale of their task became apparent. The shipyard stretched for miles in every direction, filled with half-built warships and energy cannons. They moved swiftly through the alien corridors, Zanth's knowledge of Brunali systems allowing them to bypass security checkpoints, but their luck couldn't hold forever. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a Brunali security team. For a split second, both groups froze in surprise. Then chaos erupted. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Zachary and his team dove for cover. The narrow corridor became a death trap, with neither side able to advance. "We're pinned down!" Zachary shouted over the din of battle. "Zanth, any ideas?" Zanth's eyes darted around, taking in their surroundings. Suddenly, she sprinted towards a nearby control panel. "Cover me!" she yelled, her fingers flying over the alien interface. Zachary and his team laid down suppressing fire, keeping the Brunali security forces at bay. Sweat beaded on Zanth's brow as she worked, her skin pulsing rapidly with concentration. Suddenly, the lights in the corridor flickered. The Brunali soldiers cried out in confusion as their own defense turrets swiveled towards them, opening fire. "Now!" Zanth shouted, "while they're distracted!" Zachary and his team surged forward, taking advantage of the chaos. They fought their way through the disoriented Brunali, pushing deeper into the station. After what felt like hours of intense combat and narrow escapes, they finally reached their target, the shipyard's main reactor core. The massive chamber hummed with energy, powering the entire facility. As Zachary's team began setting up their explosives, he turned to Zanth. Her eyes met his, filled with a mix of fear and hope. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, "I want you to know that you've given us a chance. You've given me hope for something I never thought possible." Zanth's skin glowed warmly, and she reached out to touch Zachary's cheek. "We will make it through this," she whispered. "We have to." With the charges set, Zachary looked around at his team. They were battered and exhausted, but commitment shone in their eyes. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the future of human-alien relations, rested on the success of their mission. Zachary took a deep breath and activated the detonator. "Let's finish this." "This." He pressed the detonator. A deep rumble shook the entire structure as the charges ignited. Zachary grabbed Zanth's hand, shouting to his team, "Move out! Now!" They sprinted through the corridors, alarms blaring all around them. The station groaned and shuddered, metal twisting as explosions ripped through its core. Brunali soldiers poured into the hallways, plasma bolts sizzling past their heads. Zachary's team returned fire, their backs to each other as they fought their way forward. Zanth's fingers flew over control panels they passed, sealing bulkheads behind them and throwing the station's systems into chaos. "Left here," she called out, guiding them through the labyrinth of corridors. As they rounded a corner, a blast caught Private Rodriguez in the chest. He stumbled, crying out in pain. Without hesitation, Zachary scooped him up, hefting the injured man over his shoulder. "I've got you, soldier," Zachary grunted, adjusting his grip on his weapon. They pressed on, the added weight slowing their progress. Sweat poured down Zachary's face as he fired one-handed. Rodriguez labored, breathing in his ear. Just as they neared the docking bay, a wall of Brunali soldiers materialized before them, weapons raised. Zachary's heart sank. They were cornered, outnumbered, and out of time. To his surprise, Zanth stepped forward, her skin pulsing with a complex pattern of light. She raised her hands, speaking in the lilting tones of her native language. "Brothers, sisters," she pleaded, switching to English for Zachary's benefit. "Can't you see the destruction our actions have wrought? We came to this galaxy as explorers, not conquerors. This war serves only to corrupt our society and destroy countless innocent lives. The Brunali soldiers hesitated, their weapons wavering. Zachary saw confusion in their eyes, a flicker of doubt. "Now!" he shouted, seizing the moment of distraction. His team surged forward, catching the Brunali off guard. They burst into the docking bay, Zachary's lungs burning as he carried Rodriguez up the shuttle's ramp. The engines roared to life as Zanth's fingers danced over the controls. They lifted off just as another explosion rocked the station, nearly knocking them out of the air. Zachary strapped Rodriguez into a crash seat, checking his wound. "Hang in there, soldier. We're getting you home." The shuttle rocketed out of the disintegrating shipyard, debris pinging off their hull. A massive fireball erupted behind them as the station's reactor went critical. The shockwave hit them like a hammer, alarms screaming as systems failed. "We're losing control," Zanth shouted, wrestling with the stick. Zachary strapped himself in beside her. "There," he pointed to a desolate, cratered surface growing larger in their view screen. "That moon. Can we make it?" Zanth nodded grimly, her skin flickering with concentration. They entered the moon's thin atmosphere in a barely controlled descent, the shuttle groaning around them. With a bone-jarring impact, they skidded across the lunar surface, coming to rest in a cloud of dust and debris. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Zachary coughed, tasting blood. "Sound off. Everyone okay?" A chorus of pained affirmatives answered him. He turned to Zanth, relief flooding him as he saw her moving, apparently unharmed. "Rodriguez needs immediate attention," Sergeant Chen reported, already working on the injured man. They exited the shuttle, the stark lunar landscape stretching in every direction. Zachary's mind raced, assessing their situation. Limited supplies, no long-range communications, and a critically injured man. The taste of victory was quickly souring into the bitter reality of survival. "We need shelter," he announced. "Chen, Taylor, set up a perimeter. Johnson, see what you can salvage from the shuttle. Zanth, help me with Rodriguez." As they worked, Zachary couldn't help but notice Zanth's gaze lingering on him. Her skin pulsed with a soft, unfamiliar pattern. "Your species continues to amaze me," she said softly, as they fashioned a shelter from shuttle debris. "The way you care for each other, even in the face of certain death." Zachary paused, struck by the vulnerability in her voice. "It's who we are," he replied. "We look out for our own. And that includes you now, Zanth." Her skin brightened, and Zachary felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the exertion of their work. As days passed, their situation grew more desperate. Rodriguez's condition worsened, infection setting in despite their best efforts. Zachary divided his time between caring for the injured man, searching for resources, and working with Johnson to cobble together a long-range transmitter from shuttle parts. Zanth proved invaluable, her knowledge of Brunali technology helping them adapt their limited equipment. But Zachary noticed her watching him with increasing curiosity, especially when he interacted with the others. One night, as they huddled in their makeshift shelter, Zanth approached him. "Zachary," she began, her voice hesitant, "I've been observing your interactions, particularly your care for Rodriguez. I'm curious about human mating rituals and reproduction. How do your people form bonds?" Zachary blinked, caught off guard by the directness of her question. He felt a flutter in his stomach, realizing the implications of her interest. "Well," he started, choosing his words carefully, "it's complex. Humans form emotional connections, which can lead to physical intimacy and reproduction. But it's not just about continuing the species. It's about companionship, support, love." Zanth's skin rippled with a pattern Zachary had come to associate with deep thought. "Fascinating," she murmured. "And have you ever formed such a bond?" Before Zachary could answer, Johnson's voice cut through the stillness. "Captain, I've got something." They rushed to the makeshift communications array. A faint signal pulsed on the screen, a response to their distress call. Earth had heard them. Relief washed over Zachary, but it was short-lived. A new alert blared from their sensors. "Brunali's ship," Zanth reported, her voice tight. "They've detected our transmission." Zachary's mind raced, They were exposed, defenseless. He opened his mouth to give orders, but Zanth's gasp stopped him. "Wait," she said, staring at the approaching ship. "I know that vessel. It's Krazak's." As the Brunali scout ship descended, Zachary and his team took up defensive positions. Zanth stood exposed, her skin pulsing with a complex pattern. The ship's ramp lowered, and a tall Brunali figure emerged. Zanth stepped forward, speaking rapidly in her native tongue. Zachary watched the exchange, tension coiling in his muscles. After what seemed like an eternity, Zanth turned to him. "This is Krazak, my former mentor. He wants to help us." Zachary's instincts warred with the desperate need for rescue. He studied Krazak's face, seeing a weariness there that mirrored his own. Before he could respond, a massive shadow fell over them. A Brunali battlecruiser dropped out of orbit, weapons charging. "Get to the ship!" Krazak shouted in accented English. "I'll hold them off." Zachary hesitated for a split second, then sprang into action. "Move! Move!" he ordered, helping Chen carry Rodriguez onto Krazak's scout ship. As they lifted off, Zachary watched in awe as Krazak sprinted to the crashed shuttle. The old Brunali scientist worked furiously, rerouting power cells. The battlecruiser opened fire, energy beams slagging the lunar surface. Krazak's makeshift bomb detonated in a blinding flash, catching the larger ship off guard. Their small scout ship rocketed away from the moon, sensors screaming as the battlecruiser gave chase. Zachary's hands flew over the unfamiliar controls, following Zanth's guidance as they pushed the engines to their limits. Alarms blared as enemy weapons fire grazed their hull. Zachary's heart pounded, his mind full of the incredible sacrifices made to get them to this point. He looked at Zanth, saw the same mix of fear and persistence in her eyes. As Earth grew larger in their view screen, Zachary allowed himself a moment of hope. They had survived impossible odds, and in doing so might have changed the course of the war. But as he gazed at Zanth, he realized that perhaps the greatest change was yet to come. "Come!" The battlecruiser loomed ever closer, its weapons primed to end their desperate flight. Suddenly, a familiar voice crackled over their communication system. "This is Admiral Marcus Steele of Earth Command. Stand down immediately." A massive Earth warship dropped out of FTL, positioning itself between the fleeing scout ship and the pursuing Brunali vessel. Zachary let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding as the battlecruiser veered off, unwilling to engage this new threat. As they docked with the Earth ship, medical teams rushed to tend to Rodriguez and the other injured. Zachary found himself face to face with Admiral Steele, a tall man with steel gray hair and piercing blue eyes. "Captain Bryant," Steele said, his voice gruff but not unkind, "your team's actions may have just changed the course of this war. We've received transmissions from a growing faction of Brunali who wish to negotiate." Zachary blinked, struggling to process this information. "Sir, with all due respect, how can we trust them after everything that's happened?" Steele's gaze shifted to Zanth, who stood uncertainly at Zachary's side. "That's where you two come in. Your unique perspective will be invaluable in the negotiations to come." Over the next few days, as they traveled to a neutral space station orbiting a distant gas giant, Zachary and Zanth were briefed on their new mission. They would serve as key figures in a bold diplomatic initiative, bridging the gap between humans and Brunali. As their modified Earth shuttle approached the station, Zachary's hands tightened on the controls. A tense standoff between loyal Brunali forces and the rebel faction filled the space around them. "Steady," Zanth murmured, her skin pulsing with a calming blue light. "Remember what we practiced." Zachary nodded, guiding the shuttle through a series of complex maneuvers. The Brunali-derived technology hummed beneath his fingers, responding to his commands with a fluidity that still amazed him. They wove between the hostile ships, demonstrating a level of skill that drew grudging respect from both sides. Once aboard the station, Zachary found himself thrust into a whirlwind of diplomatic meetings and cultural exchanges. Zanth proved invaluable, her unique perspective allowing her to explain human customs to her fellow Brunali while helping the Earth diplomats grasp the intricacies of Brunali social structures. "You see," Zanth explained to a group of skeptical Brunali officials, her skin shimmering with patterns of light that Zachary had come to recognize as excitement. Humans value individual autonomy in a way that might seem chaotic to us, but it drives their innovation and adaptability. Zachary, in turn, worked tirelessly to help his fellow humans understand the Brunali. Their society is built on a foundation of collective responsibility, he explained during one late-night strategy session. We need to frame our proposals in terms of mutual benefit, not just individual gain. As the negotiations progressed, Zachary found himself growing closer to Zanth. Their shared experiences had forged a bond that transcended species, and he often caught himself marveling at the play of light across her skin or the grace of her movements. One evening, as they walked along the station's promenade, Zanth turned to him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Zachary," she said, her voice soft but determined, "I wish to learn more about human courtship rituals. Would you teach me?" Before Zachary could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. A group of hardline Brunali loyalists had released a bioengineered virus targeting humans. Chaos erupted as people fled in panic, and the station's emergency protocols kicked in, sealing off affected areas. Zachary's military training took over. He coordinated with the station's security forces, organizing evacuation routes and containment procedures. His voice rang out clear and confident over the comm systems, bringing order to the panicked masses. Meanwhile, Zanth sprang into action, her scientific knowledge proving crucial. She worked alongside human and Brunali medical teams, her fingers flying over holographic displays as she helped develop an antidote. Hours passed in a blur of activity. Zachary found himself in the thick of the action, leading a team to rescue trapped diplomats from a contaminated sector. The sight of humans and moderate Brunali working side by side to save lives filled him with a fierce hope. Finally, Zanth's voice came over the comms, tight with exhaustion but triumphant. "We've done it. The antidote is ready for distribution." As the crisis subsided, Admiral Steele seized the moment. He called for an emergency session with Commander Vex, a respected Brunali military leader who had grown disillusioned with the invasion. Zachary and Zanth stood side by side as Steele and Vex hammered out the terms of a ceasefire. The moderate Brunali agreed to stand down their forces and enter into formal peace negotiations. However, the hardline faction refused to accept the terms, retreating to a fortified base on a nearby moon with vows of continued resistance. In the aftermath, Zachary found a quiet moment with Zanth. Her skin pulsed with a soft, warm light as she looked up at him. "Your leadership today was impressive," she said, her voice carrying a note he'd never heard before. "I find myself increasingly fascinated by human behavior, especially yours." Zachary felt a warmth spread through his chest. "I'd be happy to teach you more about human customs," he said softly, "including courtship, if you're still interested." Zanth's skin flared brightly, and she reached out to touch his hand. The contact sent a shiver through him, alien yet thrilling. Their moment was interrupted by Admiral Steele. "Bryant, Zanth," he called, his voice grave. "We have a new mission for you. We're forming a joint human Brunali task force to hunt down the remaining hardliners. Given your unique bond and combined knowledge, you're our best choice to lead it." As Zachary met Zanth's gaze, he saw his own mix of excitement and apprehension reflected there. They were standing on the brink of a new era, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. With a shared nod of purpose, they turned to face their new future together, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead in their quest for lasting peace between their peoples. The newly formed joint human Brunali task force wasted no time in mobilizing for their first mission. Zachary Bryant stood on the bridge of their advanced stealth ship, the Nexus, his eyes fixed on the asteroid belt looming before them. Beside him, Zanth's skin pulsed with a pattern he'd come to recognize as anticipation. "Sensors are picking up unusual energy readings from the largest asteroid," reported Lieutenant Chen, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. "It's consistent with the intelligence reports." Zachary nodded, studying the tactical overlay. "Looks like our hardliners have been busy. Zanth, what do you make of it?" Zanth moved closer to the display, her elongated fingers tracing the contours of the asteroid. The energy signature is complex. It's a blend of Brunali and human technology, but configured in a way I've never seen before. As they approached, the true scale of the hardliner's operation became clear. The asteroid had been hollowed out and reinforced, its surface filled with defensive arrays and communication nodes. We can't risk a frontal assault, Zachary mused, his mind racing through tactical options. Zanth, how familiar are you with current Brunali security protocols? Her skin rippled with confidence. I may have been away from my people, but I've kept up with technological advancements. Their systems are sophisticated, but not impenetrable. Zachary's lips curved into a smile. Then we go in quiet, assemble a small team. We'll use the Nexus's stealth capabilities to get close, then breach their outer defenses. Within hours, Zachary led a 5-person infiltration team towards the asteroid base in a specially modified shuttle. Zanth sat beside him, her body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns as she interfaced with the shuttle's systems. Approaching outer defensive perimeter, Zachary announced, his voice low despite the secure channel. Zanth, you're up. Her fingers flew across the controls, weaving through encryption layers and bypassing security protocols. Zachary watched in awe as she worked, her mind moving at speeds he could barely comprehend. We're in, she whispered, her skin flashing triumphantly. I've created a ghost corridor through their sensor grid. We should be invisible to their defenses. The shuttle glided silently through the asteroid's outer defenses, touching down in a rarely used maintenance bay. As the team disembarked, Zachary's combat instincts kicked into high gear. He signaled for silence, leading them through dimly lit corridors. Their first encounter with the hardline Brunali came suddenly. A patrol rounded a corner, their eyes widening in shock at the sight of the infiltration team. Zachary reacted instantly, his neural implants feeding targeting data directly to his weapon. 2 quick, silent shots, and the patrol crumpled to the ground. Norin, Chen, secure these bodies and take their uniforms, Zachary ordered. We need to blend in as much as possible. As they moved deeper into the base, resistance stiffened. Alarms blared, and squads of hardline soldiers converged on their position. Zachary's team fought with precision and coordination honed through months of joint training. Human and Brunali moved as one, covering each other's weaknesses and amplifying their strengths. In the heat of battle, Zachary found himself marveling at Zanth's abilities. Her body, more flexible than any human's, allowed her to maneuver in ways that caught their enemies off guard. She wielded a Brunali energy weapon with deadly accuracy, her intimate knowledge of its workings giving her an edge. They were nearing the central control room when disaster struck. Zanth suddenly stumbled, her skin flashing with alarming patterns. Zachary, she gasped, her voice strained. Something's wrong. My body, it's changing. Zachary caught her as she collapsed, her form shuddering in his arms. He barked orders to the rest of the team, directing them to secure their position while he assessed Zanth's condition. Her skin was hot to the touch, pulsing with rapid, chaotic patterns he'd never seen before. Zanth, talk to me. What's happening? Through gritted teeth, she managed to explain. My physiology, it's been adapting to human environments. The stress of combat must have triggered some kind of accelerated change. Zachary's mind raced. They were deep in enemy territory, cut off from medical support, and now one of their key team members was incapacitated. But there was no time for doubt. I've got you, he assured her, scooping her into his arms. We're completing this mission, and we're all getting out of here alive. With Zanth cradled against his chest, Zachary pressed on. The added burden slowed him down, but it also fueled his drive. He barked orders to his team, coordinating their movements with a clarity born of necessity. They fought their way through waves of hardline soldiers, Zachary's strategic mind working overtime to compensate for their reduced combat effectiveness. Every movement was calculated, every shot precise. They couldn't afford to waste energy or ammunition. Finally, they reached the central control room. The doors slid open to reveal Commander Krell, the leader of the hardline faction. He stood before a massive control panel, his eyes blazing with fanatical intensity. You're too late, Krell snarled, his hand hovering over a glowing activation switch. Our weapon will cleanse the galaxy of human filth and brunally traitors alike. Zachary gently set Zanth down, his eyes never leaving Krell. You're wrong, Krell. This ends now. What followed was a brutal hand-to-hand fight. Krell's brunali physiology gave him superior strength, but Zachary's training and adaptability evened the odds. They traded blows in a deadly dance, each seeking an advantage. Krell landed a punishing hit, sending Zachary sprawling. With a triumphant roar, the brunali commander slammed his hand down on the activation switch. The room hummed with ominous energy as the weapon began to power up. Zachary's eyes met Zanth's across the room. Despite her weakened state, her gaze was clear and determined. In that moment, a plan formed between them without a word being spoken. As Krell turned back to gloat, Zachary launched himself forward in a desperate tackle. They crashed into the control panel, grappling for dominance. Zachary managed to pin Krell's arms, but he knew he couldn't hold the stronger brunali for long. "Zanth, now!" he shouted. Summoning her remaining strength, Zanth dragged herself to the control panel. Her fingers flew across the alien interface, her unique understanding of both human and brunali technology, allowing her to navigate the complex systems. "It's not shutting down," she gasped, her skin pulsing with alarm. "The weapon's already building a gravitational singularity. If it reaches critical mass..." Zachary grunted, straining to keep Krell pinned. "Options?" Zanth's mind worked furiously. "I can reverse the polarity, cause the singularity to collapse in on itself, but the energy release will destroy this entire base." "Do it," Zachary ordered without hesitation. "Team, prepare for immediate evac." As Zanth initiated the reversal sequence, the base shuddered around them. Krell howled in rage, redoubling his efforts to break free. Zachary's muscles screamed in protest, but he held on with iron will. "It's done," Zanth announced, her voice weak but triumphant. "We have minutes before the collapse." Zachary delivered a final decisive blow to Krell, knocking the brunali commander unconscious. He scooped up Zanth once more, and they ran. The escape was a blur of collapsing corridors and desperate sprints to waiting escape pods. Zachary ensured every member of his team was accounted for, including the unconscious Krell. As their pod rocketed away from the doomed asteroid, Zachary watched through the view screen as the hardliner's base imploded in a spectacular release of energy. As they rendezvoused with the Nexus, Zachary allowed himself a moment to breathe. He looked down at Zanth, still cradled in his arms. Her body had stopped convulsing, but her skin pulsed with unfamiliar patterns. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. Zanth's eyes opened, meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "Changed," she whispered, "but alive thanks to you." As the Nexus set course for Earth, Zachary knew their mission had only just begun. The hardliners were defeated, but the challenges of forging a lasting peace between humans and brunali loomed large, and whatever was happening to Zanth would undoubtedly complicate matters further. But looking at her, feeling the weight of her in his arms and seeing the trust in her eyes, Zachary felt a fierce sense of hope. Together, they had already accomplished the impossible. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Zachary and Zanth stepped off the Nexus onto Earth's soil, the weight of their recent mission still heavy on their shoulders. The defeat of the hardline brunali faction had opened a new chapter in human-brunali relations, but Zachary knew their work was just getting started. As they walked through the bustling spaceport, he noticed Zanth's gait had changed subtly. Her movements were smoother, more fluid, as if her body was adapting to Earth's gravity. She caught his questioning glance and smiled. "I feel different," she said, her voice low. "But not in a bad way. It's as if my body is finding a new equilibrium." Zachary nodded, his mind racing with questions. "We should get you checked out by the medical team. Make sure everything's okay." Their debrief with Admiral Steele was mercifully brief. The older man's eyes crinkled with pride as he congratulated them on their success. "You two have done more for peace than 100 diplomats," he said. "Take some time to rest. You've earned it." As they left Steele's office, Zachary's comm unit buzzed. A message from Dr. Eleanor Frost, chief xenobiologist at the Earth Brunali Integration Research Center. She requested an urgent meeting with Zanth. Zanth's skin pulsed with curiosity. What do you think she wants? Zachary shrugged. Only one way to find out. Dr. Frost's lab was a marvel of human and Brunali technology. Holographic displays flickered with complex biological data, while sleek medical devices hummed softly in the background. The doctor herself was a tall, angular woman with piercing green eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "I've been monitoring the data from your last physical, Zanth, and the results are extraordinary." She called up a holographic display of Zanth's DNA structure. Even to Zachary's untrained eye, the changes were apparent. Strands of alien genetic code were interwoven with sequences that looked decidedly more human. "Your body is adapting to Earth's environment at an unprecedented rate," Dr. Frost explained. "It's not just surface-level changes. Your entire genetic structure is slowly reconfiguring itself." Zanth leaned forward, her skin rippling with a mix of fascination and apprehension. "Is it dangerous?" Dr. Frost shook her head. "Not from what we can tell, but it's completely uncharted territory. I'd like to run a series of tests, monitor your transformation more closely. The implications for human-Brunali coexistence could be enormous." Zachary felt a knot form in his stomach. He didn't like the idea of Zanth being treated like a lab specimen. "What kind of tests are we talking about?" Dr. Frost detailed a rigorous regimen of physical exams, genetic sequencing, and environmental exposure trials. It sounded exhausting, potentially painful. Zachary opened his mouth to object, but Zanth cut him off. "I'll do it," she said firmly. Her skin pulsed with tenacity. "If my experience can help our peoples come together, it's worth any discomfort." Zachary wanted to argue, but he saw the willpower in Zanth's eyes. He knew that look. There would be no changing her mind. Over the next few weeks, Zanth underwent a battery of tests. Zachary stood by her side as much as he could, watching with a mix of awe and concern as her body continued to change. Her skin developed a more human-like texture, losing some of its bioluminescence but gaining a warm, golden hue. Her respiratory system adapted, allowing her to process Earth's atmosphere with ease. Between tests, they found moments of peace. Zachary took Zanth to his favorite spots on Earth, delighting in her wonder at things he'd always taken for granted. They walked through bustling city streets, Zanth marveling at the sheer diversity of human cultures. But it was the ocean that truly captured her heart. The first time Zachary took her to a beach, Zanth stood transfixed, staring out at the endless expanse of blue. "It's magnificent," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "We have nothing like this on my world." Zachary smiled, watching as she tentatively dipped her toes in the surf. Her skin rippled with patterns of joy and excitement. In that moment, all the stress of the past weeks seemed to melt away. Their idyllic interlude was shattered by Dr. Frost's latest discovery. Zachary sat in stunned silence as the doctor explained her findings. "Zanth's reproductive system is undergoing significant changes," Dr. Frost said, her voice clinically detached. "Based on our latest genetic analysis, it appears she may be becoming compatible for breeding with humans." The implications hit Zachary like a physical blow. He looked at Zanth, seeing his own mix of shock and confusion reflected in her eyes. Before they could fully process this information, the news leaked. Suddenly, Zachary and Zanth found themselves at the center of a media firestorm. Their images were splashed across news feeds, accompanied by sensationalized headlines about alien-human hybrids. Protesters gathered outside the research center, their angry shouts audible even through the soundproofed walls. Some carried signs proclaiming Zachary and Zanth as symbols of a new era of unity. Others bore more ominous messages, decrying the contamination of the human race. Zachary felt the weight of countless eyes upon them, judging their every move. He longed for the simplicity of their earlier missions, where the lines between friend and foe were clear. As if in answer to his unspoken wish, Admiral Steele called them to his office. The older man's face was grim as he briefed them on a new threat. "We're calling them the Terran Purity Front," Steele said, pulling up images of attacked Brunali settlements and sabotage joint projects. They're opposed to any form of integration with alien species, and they're gaining support. Zachary felt a chill run down his spine. He'd seen firsthand the destruction wrought by extremists on both sides. "What do you need us to do, sir?" Steele's eyes were hard. "Find them. Stop them. But do it quietly. We can't risk inflaming tensions any further." As they left Steele's office, Zachary's mind was already racing with plans. He glanced at Zanth, saw the dedication in her stance. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Their first lead took them to a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city. As they approached, Zachary's combat instincts kicked into high gear. Something felt off. "Zanth," he whispered, "are you picking up anything unusual?" Her skin rippled with concentration as she focused her heightened senses. "There's some kind of energy signature inside. It's faint, but it doesn't match any standard human technology." Zachary nodded, his suspicions confirmed. "Let's move in. Stay close." They slipped inside, moving silently through the shadowed interior. The warehouse appeared empty at first glance, but Zachary's trained eye caught signs of recent activity: scuff marks on the floor, the faint odor of ozone in the air. As they reached the center of the building, a holographic display flickered to life. Zachary's blood ran cold as he recognized the face that appeared before them. "Dr. Frost?" Zanth gasped. The xenobiologist's image smiled coldly. "I'm afraid you've walked into a trap, my dear subjects. Your unique bond poses too great a threat to human purity. The Terran Purity Front cannot allow it to continue." Alarms blared as armed figures emerged from hidden alcoves, their weapons trained on Zachary and Zanth. As they stood back to back, facing this new threat, Zachary's mind raced. They had unknowingly stumbled into the heart of the very organization they were meant to destroy. The true test of their partnership in the future of human-Brunali relations was about to begin. Zachary's muscles tensed, ready for action. He glanced at Zanth, her skin pulsing with a mix of dedication and anxiety. In that split second of shared understanding, they made their decision. "We surrender," Zachary announced, raising his hand slowly. Zanth followed suit, her movements fluid and graceful, despite the tension in the air. Dr. Frost's hologram flickered, her expression a mixture of triumph and suspicion. "Wise choice," she said coldly. "Secure them." As the armed figures approached, Zachary's mind raced, formulating a plan. He allowed himself to be roughly handled, his weapons stripped away. Beside him, Zanth remained calm, her skin now a muted palette of cautious neutrality. "What now, Doctor?" Zachary asked, his voice steady. "You've caught us. What's your endgame?" Frost's hologram sneered. "You'll find out soon enough. Take them to the holding area." As they were marched through the warehouse, Zachary took careful note of their surroundings. The building was larger than it appeared from the outside, with hidden passages and rooms branching off from the main area. He counted at least 20 armed guards, all sporting the same nondescript black uniforms. They were shoved into a small, windowless room. The door slammed shut behind them, the sound of multiple locks engaging echoing in the confined space. "Well," Zachary said, turning to Zanth, "this isn't quite how I planned our evening." Zanth's skin rippled with a pattern that Zachary had come to recognize as wry amusement. "At least we're together," she replied, her voice low. "Any ideas?" Zachary nodded, moving closer to whisper in her ear. "They think they've caught us, but we've caught them. This is our chance to infiltrate from the inside." Over the next few hours, they put their plan into action. When guards came to interrogate them, Zachary and Zanth played the part of disillusioned idealists, expressing frustration with the current state of human-Brunali relations. They dropped hints about their willingness to consider alternative viewpoints. Their performance was convincing enough to pique the interest of their captors. After a series of intense questioning sessions, they were finally granted an audience with the leader of this Terran Purity Front cell. Victor Holt was a charismatic man in his late 40s, with piercing blue eyes and a commanding presence. He studied Zachary and Zanth with unnerving intensity as they were brought before him in a large, well-appointed office. "So," Holt said, his voice smooth and cultured, "the famous Zachary and Zanth. I must admit, I'm intrigued by your apparent change of heart." Zachary met his gaze steadily. We've seen things, Mr. Holt. Things that have made us question everything we thought we knew about human-Brunali cooperation. Zanth nodded, her skin pulsing with a carefully controlled pattern of doubt and curiosity. The changes happening to my body, they're more extensive than anyone realized. We're worried about the implications. Holt leaned forward, clearly interested. Go on. For the next hour, Zachary and Zanth spun a tale of government cover-ups and hidden agendas, weaving just enough truth into their lies to make them believable. They expressed concerns about the pace of integration, the potential loss of human identity, the unforeseen consequences of Zanth's transformation. By the end of their performance, Holt was nodding thoughtfully. You've given me much to consider, he said. Perhaps you two could be valuable assets to our cause. Over the next few days, Zachary and Zanth were gradually integrated into the Terran Purity Front's operations. They attended meetings, each one larger than the last, gathering crucial intelligence on the organization's structure and plans. It was at one of these meetings that they first heard the name James Farrow. Zachary felt a chill run down his spine as Holt announced the Undersecretary's covert support for their cause. With Farrow's help, Holt proclaimed to the assembled crowd, we'll finally have the resources to make a real difference. Our next operation will strike a blow against the very heart of the human-Brunali cooperation efforts. As Holt outlined the planned attack on the joint research facility, Zachary and Zanth exchanged a subtle glance. The stakes had just gotten much higher. Their covert mission nearly unraveled a week later. As they were leaving a strategy session, a burly security guard squinted suspiciously at Zanth. Hey, he growled, reaching for her arm. Something's not right with you. Zachary reacted instantly. He stepped between Zanth and the guard, his movement fluid and practiced. Is there a problem? He asked, voice calm but with an undercurrent of steel. The guard's eyes narrowed. Yeah, there's a problem. Your girlfriend here doesn't look quite human, does she? Zanth's skin rippled with alarm, her latest physical changes becoming more pronounced under stress. The guard's eyes widened in recognition. It's them, he shouted. The infiltrators. Chaos erupted. Zachary moved with lightning speed, disarming the guard with a swift series of strikes. Zanth sprang into action, her Brunali strength allowing her to effortlessly toss two more guards aside. Time to go, Zachary said grimly, grabbing Zanth's hand. They raced through the warehouse, alarms blaring around them. Zanth's knowledge of Brunali technology proved invaluable as she short-circuited security systems with precise bursts of electromagnetic energy. They burst out onto the street, the sounds of pursuit close behind. Zachary spotted a parked vehicle, an older model without modern anti-theft systems. In seconds, he had the engine running. Get in, he yelled to Zanth, who was using her electromagnetic abilities to scramble their pursuers' communication devices. The chase through the city was harrowing. Zachary pushed the stolen vehicle to its limits, weaving through traffic with practiced skill. Zanth kept their pursuers at bay, her powers disrupting their vehicles and weaponry. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, they finally lost their tail in a maze of back alleys. Zachary brought the car to a stop in a secluded parking garage. That, Zanth said, her skin pulsing with a mix of exhilaration and relief, was too close. Zachary nodded grimly, already pulling out a secure communicator. We need to contact Steele. The situation is worse than we thought. Admiral Steele's face was grim as Zachary relayed their findings. The revelation of Undersecretary Farrow's involvement clearly shook him. This goes deeper than we ever imagined, Steele said, his voice heavy. You've done well, both of you, but now we need you to go back in. Zachary felt Zanth tense beside him. Sir? The attack on the research facility must be stopped, Steele explained. We're putting together a joint human-Brunali strike team. You two will lead it. As Steele outlined the mission parameters, Zachary felt a familiar mix of anticipation and dread. The stakes were higher than ever before. The fate of human-Brunali relations hung in the balance. He looked at Zanth, saw the same purpose reflected in her eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as one. Partners in every sense, they prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. The joint human-Brunali strike team moved with practiced efficiency through the research facility. Zachary led point, his senses heightened by years of combat experience. Zanth followed close behind, her skin pulsing with patterns of alertness and concentration. As they rounded a corner, chaos erupted. Terran Purity Front operatives opened fire, their weapons modified with experimental tech. Zachary dove for cover, pulling Zanth down with him. Steele didn't mention they'd have bleeding-edge weaponry, he muttered, returning fire with precision. Zanth's skin rippled with a pattern Zachary recognized as grim humor. Perhaps we should file a complaint about incomplete intel after we survive this. The firefight was intense but brief. The strike team's superior training and Zanth's electromagnetic abilities gave them the edge. As the last of the extremists fell, Zachary motioned the team forward. They found Undersecretary Farrow in the facility's control room, frantically trying to purge data from the system. His eyes widened in shock as Zachary and Zanth burst in. "It's over, Farrow," Zachary said, weapon trained on the politician. Farrow's shock gave way to a sneer. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This goes beyond your simple notions of right and wrong." Before anyone could react, Farrow hit a button on his wrist device. Alarms blared throughout the facility. "Self-destruct sequence initiated," an automated voice announced. 5 minutes to detonation." Zachary cursed, securing Farrow as Zanth rushed to the main console. Her fingers flew over the controls, her skin pulsing with intense concentration. "I can't stop it," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "But I can download the data. We need to move now." They escaped the facility with seconds to spare, the explosion rocking the ground beneath their feet. As the dust settled, Zachary knew their real battle was just beginning. The following weeks were a whirlwind of debriefings, classified meetings, and tense negotiations. The exposure of Farrow's involvement sent shockwaves through both human and Brunali political spheres. Zachary and Zanth found themselves at the center of a political firestorm. Their relationship, once a symbol of hope, was now scrutinized under the harsh light of public opinion. The joint human-Brunali tribunal was held in a grand hall, its architecture a blend of Earth and Brunali design. Zachary felt the weight of countless eyes upon them as he and Zanth took their seats. Admiral Steele's opening statement was concise and to the point. "We are here to uncover the truth behind the Terran Purity Front's actions and the extent of the corruption within our own ranks." As key witnesses, Zachary and Zanth were called to testify. Zachary recounted their infiltration of the extremist group, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. When it was Zanth's turn, a Brunali counselor leaned forward. "Agent Zanth, can you explain the nature of your relationship with Agent Zachary?" Zanth's skin rippled with a mix of emotions. "Our partnership is based on mutual respect and shared goals. We complement each other's strengths." The counselor's eyes narrowed. "But is it not true that your prolonged exposure to him has caused unprecedented changes in your physiology?" Before Zanth could respond, shouts erupted from the gallery. "Abomination!" someone cried. "The human is corrupting her!" Security moved to quell the disturbance, but the damage was done. The hearing devolved into a heated debate about species purity and the dangers of integration. As they left the tribunal that evening, Zachary noticed the strain on Zanth's face. "You okay?" he asked softly. Zanth's skin pulsed with a pattern he'd never seen before. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never thought our relationship would cause such controversy." Zachary took her hand, ignoring the disapproving glares from passers-by. "We'll get through this," he said. "Together." The next day brought unexpected news. Dr. Eleanor Frost requested an urgent meeting with Zachary, Zanth, and Admiral Steele. Frost's lab was a marvel of human and Brunali technology. The scientist's eyes gleamed with excitement as she pulled up a holographic display. "I've made a breakthrough," she announced. "Zanth's adaptive abilities are not unique to her. It's a dormant trait in all Brunali, activated by prolonged exposure to Earth's environment." The implications were staggering. Steele frowned, processing the information. "This could change everything," he mused. Before they could discuss further, Steele's communicator buzzed. His face darkened as he listened to the message. "We have a situation," he said grimly. "A group of rogue Brunali scientists has stolen crucial data from Dr. Frost's research. Intelligence suggests they're led by Dr. Zarn." Zanth's skin pulsed with alarm. "Zarn? He's brilliant but unstable. What could he want with that data?" Steele's expression was grim. "We believe they're attempting to reverse engineer the adaptation process. Their goal? To make humans compatible with the Brunali homeworld." Zachary felt a chill run down his spine. The implications were horrifying. "What do you need us to do, sir?" "We've tracked them to a secret laboratory in the Rocky Mountains," Steele replied. "I need you two to lead a covert operation. Recover the stolen data and apprehend Dr. Zarn." As they prepared for the mission, Zachary couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. The stakes had never been higher, and he knew that whatever they found in that mountain laboratory would change everything. The Rockies loomed before them, their snow-capped peaks shrouded in mist. Zachary and Zanth led their team through a narrow ravine, approaching the hidden entrance to Zarn's facility. "Remember," Zachary whispered, "we don't know what kind of defenses they've set up. Stay alert." Zanth nodded, her skin rippling with a steely perseverance. As they neared the concealed door, she raised her hand, concentrating. The air around her seemed to shimmer. "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures," she murmured, "like nothing I've ever sensed before." Zachary frowned. "Can you disrupt their security systems?" Zanth's skin pulsed with effort. "I think so, but it's different. Adapted somehow." With a soft hum, the door slid open. They entered cautiously, weapons at the ready. The corridor beyond was eerily silent. As they descended deeper into the facility, signs of Zarn's work became apparent. They passed laboratories filled with strange equipment, an unsettling fusion of human and Brunali technology. Suddenly, an alarm blared. Armed guards poured into the corridor, their movements unnaturally fast and precise. "Take cover!" Zachary shouted, diving behind a console. The firefight was intense. These weren't ordinary guards, Zachary realized. Their reflexes were enhanced, their strength beyond human norms. Zanth's abilities proved crucial. Her electromagnetic field disrupted the guards' enhanced systems, giving their team the edge they needed. As the last guard fell, Zachary approached one of the bodies. His breath caught as he saw the guard's face, a grotesque blend of human and Brunali features. "What has Zarn done?" Zanth whispered, her skin pulsing with horror. They pressed on, fighting their way through more enhanced guards. Each level of the facility revealed new horrors, failed experiments, twisted combinations of human and Brunali physiology. Finally, they reached the central laboratory. Dr. Zarn stood before a massive containment unit, his back to them. As they entered, he turned, a maniacal gleam in his eyes. "Ah, the famous Zachary and Zanth," he said, his voice unnaturally calm. "You're just in time to witness the dawn of a new era." Zachary raised his weapon. "Step away from the controls, Zarn. It's over." Zarn laughed, the sound chilling in its intensity. "Over? My dear boy, it's only beginning. Behold the future of both our species." He pressed a button, and the containment unit opened with a hiss. A figure stepped out, its form shifting and changing before their eyes. Zachary felt his blood run cold as he realized Zarn's true plan. The mad scientist wasn't just adapting humans to the Brunali world. He was creating something entirely new. As the hybrid creature advanced, Zachary and Zanth exchanged a glance. Whatever happened next, they knew their world would never be the same. The hybrid creature lunged forward, its form shifting and twisting in ways that defied natural law. Zachary fired, but the bullets seemed to pass through the being's malleable flesh without effect. Zanth's electromagnetic field crackled with intensity as she attempted to disrupt the creature's cellular structure. "We need to end this now," Zachary shouted, diving to avoid a vicious swipe from the hybrid's elongated arm. Zanth's skin pulsed with purpose as she focused her abilities on the containment unit behind Zarn. With a burst of energy, the unit overloaded, sending a cascade of sparks through the lab's systems. Alarms blared as the facility's self-destruct sequence initiated. Zarn's maniacal laughter echoed through the chaos. "You've doomed us all!" We need to move! Zachary grabbed Zanth's arm, but she stumbled, her skin flickering with an alarming pattern. Something's wrong, she gasped, her voice strained. The interface with Earth tech, it's destabilizing my physiology. Zachary scooped her into his arms without hesitation. Hold on, he urged, racing through the collapsing facility with their team close behind. They burst out of the hidden entrance just as the mountain shook with a massive explosion. Zachary shielded Zanth with his body as debris rained down around them. When the dust settled, he looked down at his partner, his heart racing with fear at her unresponsive state. We need immediate evacuation, he barked into his comm. Agent Zanth is down. Repeat, Agent Zanth is critical. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. A medevac transported them to a state-of-the-art facility specializing in human Brunali physiology. Zachary paced outside the operating room, his mind replaying the events in the mountain lab. Dr. Eleanor Frost emerged, her face etched with concern. We've stabilized her for now, but Zanth's condition is precarious. The rapid transformation she underwent to interface with Earth technology has thrown her entire system into chaos. Zachary's voice was hoarse as he asked, What can we do? We're doing everything we can, Frost assured him, but her body is essentially fighting a war between her Brunali origins and her adapted form. The next 48 hours will be critical. As Zanth fought for survival in the medical bay, news of their mission spread like wildfire. Zachary found himself thrust into the spotlight, bombarded with questions about their heroic actions to prevent the forced mutation of both species. Admiral Steele arrived, his normally stern features softened with concern. How is she? Fighting, Zachary replied, his eyes never leaving the observation window where he could see the medical team working tirelessly over Zanth's still form. Steele nodded, then lowered his voice. Your actions have garnered significant attention, both here and on the Brunali homeworld. There's talk of making you two official ambassadors for human-Brunali relations. Zachary barely registered the words, his focus entirely on Zanth's fluctuating vital signs. With all due respect, sir, I couldn't care less about politics right now. I understand, Steele said, placing a hand on Zachary's shoulder. But you should be prepared. Your relationship with Zanth has become a symbol of hope for many. It's also drawn the attention of those who fear what it represents. As if to underscore Steele's warning, a commotion erupted in the corridor. Security personnel rushed to intercept a group of men in lab coats attempting to force their way into the restricted area. We demand access to the Brunali specimen, one of them shouted. The data from her unique physiology could revolutionize human enhancement. Zachary's fatigue evaporated, replaced by a surge of protective fury. He strode towards the intruders, his voice cold with awe-inspiring rage. That specimen is my partner, and you will not lay a hand on her. The lead scientist, a wiry man with sharp features, sneered. You don't understand the potential here. Dr. Victor Reeves, at your service. I lead the most advanced human enhancement program on Earth. The secrets locked in that alien's DNA could... Zachary's fist connected with Reeves's jaw before he could finish the sentence. Security quickly subdued the rest of the group as Steele barked orders to have them removed and charged. I want round-the-clock security on this floor, Zachary demanded, his hands still clenched at his sides. Steele nodded grimly. Already done. I'll also be assigning a personal detail to you and Zanth. I have a feeling this won't be the last attempt to exploit your situation. Days passed in an agonizing vigil. Zachary refused to leave Zanth's side, watching as her skin flickered between various patterns, sometimes so rapidly it was like watching strobe lights dance across her body. On the fifth day, Dr. Frost burst into the room, her eyes wide with excitement. We've had a breakthrough. Zanth's DNA has reconfigured itself. It's unlike anything we've ever seen, a perfect balance between her Brunali heritage and her Earth-adapted form. Zachary leaned forward, hope rising in his chest. What does that mean? It means, Frost explained, her voice filled with awe, that Zanth has become a bridge between our two species. Her body can now thrive in both Earth and Brunali environments. This could be the key to true integration. As if responding to the doctor's words, Zanth's eyes fluttered open. Her skin pulsed with a weak but steady pattern that Zachary recognized as relief and affection. "Zachary," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. He took her hand, feeling the unique texture of her skin against his palm. "I'm here," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." Zanth's recovery progressed steadily over the next few weeks. As her strength returned, so did the political pressure surrounding their situation. Zachary fielded constant requests for interviews and official statements, always putting Zanth's well-being first. One afternoon, as Zachary sat by Zanth's bedside, a Brunali officer in full military regalia entered the room. She introduced herself as Captain Lyra, her posture rigid but her eyes soft as she looked at Zanth. "We served together before her defection," Lyra explained to Zachary. "I've come with a proposal from a significant portion of the Brunali population. Your partner's example has inspired many. We want to establish a pilot program for volunteers to undergo controlled adaptation to Earth's environment." Zanth's skin rippled with interest. "That's a bold move, Lyra. How has the High Council responded?" Lyra's expression tightened. "There's resistance, of course, but the tide is turning. Your actions in the mountain lab, stopping Zarn's insane plan, it's opened many eyes to the possibilities of cooperation." Before they could discuss further, alarms blared throughout the facility. Admiral Steele's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. "All personnel, we are under attack. Multiple explosions reported at joint human Brunali facilities across the globe. Zachary, report to command immediately." Zachary hesitated, looking at Zanth. She nodded, her skin pulsing with a pattern that conveyed both concern and commitment. "Go," she said. "They need you." In the command center, screens displayed chaos unfolding around the world. Steele's face was grim as he briefed Zachary. "The Terran Purity Front and Zarn's followers have merged into a new group calling themselves the Genetic Sovereignty League. They're well-organized and well-funded. This coordinated attack is just the beginning." Zachary absorbed the information, his mind racing. "What do you need from me, sir?" Steele's eyes met his, filled with the weight of the decision he was about to convey. "I'm authorizing the formation of an elite mixed-species task force to combat this threat, and I want you to lead it, Zachary." The responsibility of the role hit Zachary like a physical force. He thought of Zanth, still recovering, and the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve. The fate of human Brunali relations hung in the balance once again. "When do we start?" Zachary asked, squaring his shoulders. Steele's relief was palpable. "Immediately. We've detected unusual energy signatures at a suspected GSL base in the Andes. Your team will insert tonight." As Zachary began reviewing the mission parameters, his thoughts turned to Zanth. He knew she would understand, even encourage him to take on this role. Their shared vision of a future where humans and Brunali could coexist peacefully was worth fighting for. With renewed commitment, Zachary focused on the task at hand. The GSL had to be stopped, and he would lead the charge. The real battle for the future of both their species was just beginning. Zachary's mind raced as he absorbed the mission briefing. The Genetic Sovereignty League's weapons shipment posed an imminent threat to both human and Brunali populations. He glanced at the faces of his mixed-species task force, each member bringing unique skills to the table. "We move out in 10, he announced, his voice calm but authoritative. "Captain Lyra, I want you on point. Your knowledge of Brunali tactics will be crucial." Lyra nodded, her posture rigid with military precision. "Understood, Commander." As the team geared up, Dr. Eleanor Frost approached Zachary, her tablet displaying a complex network of security protocols. "I've mapped out the facility's defense systems. If we can access their main terminal, I should be able to disable most of their safeguards." Zachary clasped her shoulder. "Good work, Doc. Stay close to me once we're inside." The desert night enveloped them as they approached the GSL facility. Zachary signaled for the team to halt, his eyes scanning the perimeter. Heavily armed guards patrolled the outer walls, their silhouettes stark against the moonlit sand. "Lyra, what's your assessment?" Zachary whispered. The Brunali officer's skin pulsed faintly as she analyzed the defenses. Standard Brunali formation, but with human adaptations. "They're expecting us." Zachary weighed their options. A frontal assault would be suicide, but they couldn't afford to waste time. Suddenly, his comm unit crackled to life. "Zachary, do you copy?" The familiar voice sent a jolt through his system. "Zanth?" he breathed, scarcely believing his ears. "What's your status?" "Fully recovered and en route to your position. ETA 3 minutes." Relief and excitement surged through Zachary. "Copy that. We'll hold position until you arrive." True to her word, a sleek shuttle touched down moments later. Zanth emerged, her hybrid form radiating power and confidence. Zachary felt his breath catch as she approached, her skin shimmering with patterns he recognized as affection and drive. "Looks like I arrived just in time for the party," Zanth said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Zachary quickly briefed her on the situation. Zanth's eyes narrowed as she focused on the facility. "I can sense the electromagnetic field surrounding the complex. Give me a moment." Her body began to glow faintly as she extended her perception. "There's a weak point in their defenses, northwest corner. If we strike there, I can create an opening in their security grid." With Zanth's abilities augmenting their approach, the team moved swiftly. As they neared the wall, GSL forces opened fire. Zachary and his team responded with pinpoint accuracy, their weapons a mix of human and Brunali technology. "Now, Zanth," Zachary called out as they reached the designated spot. Zanth's form blazed with energy as she interfaced with the facility's systems. The air crackled around her, and suddenly a section of the wall shimmered and disappeared. "Move, move, move," Zachary ordered, leading the charge into the compound. Inside, chaos erupted. Alarms blared as GSL soldiers scrambled to repel the invasion. Zachary's team fought with coordinated precision, their diverse abilities complementing each other perfectly. Lyra's tactical insights allowed them to anticipate and counter enemy movements, while Dr. Frost worked furiously to hack into the facility's mainframe. Zanth stayed close to Zachary, her electromagnetic abilities creating shields to deflect incoming fire. As they pushed deeper into the complex, Zachary couldn't help but marvel at how naturally they worked together, anticipating each other's moves without a word. "The central lab is just ahead," Dr. Frost called out, her eyes fixed on her datapad. "But the security there is unlike anything I've seen." Zachary turned to Zanth. "Think you can handle it?" Her skin pulsed with confidence. "Watch me." As they approached the sealed doors of the main laboratory, Zanth stepped forward. Her body began to glow intensely, tendrils of energy extending from her fingertips to interface with the locking mechanism. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she grappled with the complex security protocols. "It's fighting me," she gritted out. "The system, it's adaptive." Zachary placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the raw power coursing through her. "You've got this, Zanth. I believe in you." With a final surge of effort, Zanth broke through. The door slid open, revealing a vast chamber filled with experimental equipment and weapon prototypes. At the center stood Dr. Victor Reeves, his wiry frame belying the manic intensity in his eyes. "Ah, the famous Zachary and his alien whore," he sneered. "Come to witness the salvation of humanity?" Zachary's eyes sharp at the insult, but he kept his voice level. "It's over, Reeves. Surrender now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." Reeves laughed, a harsh grating sound. "Oh, it's far from finished." He slammed his hand down on a nearby console. Red warning lights began to flash throughout the lab. "In fact, I'd say things are about to get much more interesting." A computerized voice echoed through the chamber. "Self-destruct sequence initiated, mutagenic release in T-5 minutes." Zachary's blood ran cold as he realized the stakes had just risen exponentially. He turned to his team. "Frost, Zanth, work on disabling that sequence. The rest of you, secure the perimeter and prepare for evacuation." As the others moved to their tasks, Zachary faced Reeves. The scientist's body began to twitch and bulge, experimental enhancements activating beneath his skin. "Let's see how the great Commander Zachary fares against the future of human evolution," Reeves growled, his voice distorting as his body transformed. Zachary set his jaw, falling into a fighting stance. "Bring it on!" The two men clashed in a furious exchange of blows. Reeves' augmented strength sent Zachary flying across the room, but years of combat experience allowed him to roll with the impact and spring back to his feet. As they fought, Zachary could hear Zanth and Frost working frantically to disable the self-destruct sequence. Reeves pressed his advantage, his enhanced speed making him a blur of motion. Zachary blocked a vicious right hook, feeling the bones in his forearm crack under the force. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he retaliated with a series of quick jabs to Reeves's midsection, searching for weak points in the scientist's augmented physiology. 3 minutes until mutagenic release, the computerized voice announced. Across the lab, Zanth's entire body glowed with electromagnetic energy as she merged her consciousness with the facility's systems. "It's too complex," she called out, her voice strained. I can't break through." Zachary ducked under another of Reeves's swings, his mind racing. They were out of time and options. In that moment of clarity, he remembered something Zanth had once told him about the duality of her nature, neither fully human nor fully Brunali, but a bridge between both. "Zanth," he shouted, narrowly avoiding a crushing blow from Reeves. "Stop trying to think like a human or a Brunali. You're both. Use that." Understanding flashed in Zanth's eyes. Her skin rippled with a new pattern as she refocused her efforts. The air around her seemed to vibrate with potential. Reeves, sensing the shift, made a desperate lunge toward the console. "No!" he roared. "I won't let you ruin everything!" Zachary intercepted him, drawing on every ounce of strength and skill he possessed. In a fluid sequence of movements that blended human martial arts with Brunali combat techniques, he outmaneuvered Reeves. A precise strike to a cluster of nerve endings Zanth had once shown him sent the enhanced scientist crashing to the ground, temporarily paralyzed. "Zanth, now!" Zachary yelled. With a cry that seemed to resonate on multiple frequencies, Zanth pushed her hybrid abilities to their absolute limit. Her form became a conduit of pure energy, bridging the gap between human and Brunali technology. The lab systems sparked and sputtered as she rewrote their very code of existence. "Self-destruct sequence aborted," the computer announced. "Mutagenic containment stable." As the immediate danger passed, Zachary rushed to Zanth's side. She swayed on her feet, drained but triumphant. He caught her in his arms, holding her close as relief washed over them both. "We did it," Zanth murmured, her skin pulsing weakly with patterns of exhaustion and affection. Zachary nodded, too overcome for words. Around them, the rest of the team secured Reeves and began the process of containing the weapons and gathering intelligence. As the adrenaline of battle faded, Zachary became acutely aware of how perfectly Zanth fit against him, despite their different origins. In her eyes, he saw not just the reflection of their shared victory, but the promise of a future they would build together, a future where the lines between human and Brunali blurred, and where love could truly conquer all.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.